Welcome to the Deep Dive. You've sent us some really interesting stuff on the nature of love specifically, challenging that whole love is an action idea. Let's just say this isn't your typical Valentine's Day conversation. We're going beyond the greeting card cliches with you today to explore what real love looks like in action.
Absolutely. This is about going deeper than surface level gestures and getting to the core of how we understand love, especially in relationships.
So we've got this source that's really pushing us to think differently about this whole love is an action thing. Like, they start off with this example, and it really makes you think. It's about two people giving money to someone who's homeless.
Oh, I think I read that one.
Yeah, so on the surface, it's like, okay, same act of generosity, right?
Right.
But then the source is like, hold on a second, look at the why. One person, it's coming from this place of genuine compassion, and the other, totally different story. They're just trying to look good in front of other people. And it makes you wonder, how often are we just misinterpreting actions like that, especially in our own relationships?
It's like you think you're seeing one thing, but the motivation behind it is totally different.
Exactly. And that's what's so powerful about this source. It's like they're forcing us to look beyond just the surface level. They actually even call it fear-driven love, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, that really gets you thinking. So, like, are we doing things out of love, or are we doing them because we're afraid of something? Afraid of being alone, maybe. Afraid of what other people will think.
Okay, so how does this, like, fear-driven love actually play out in relationships, though?
I mean, think about it. Have you ever, like, gotten a gift after an argument? And it's like, is this really about me, or are they just trying to smooth things over, avoid a bigger fight?
That is such a good point. It's so easy to just get caught up in the gesture itself, like, oh, they got me flowers, they must love me. But what's the real motivation there?
And the source is saying a lot of times it can be that fear of being alone. Or like maybe someone's constantly doing things for their partner, but it's more about needing to feel needed themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. It's like they're trying to fill a void in themselves, not necessarily coming from a place of genuine love for the other person. And this is where the source's whole thing about love being a spirit really threw me for a loop at first.
I feel that. Sounds kind of out there.
Right. Like, are we talking ghosts now? Like,
Yeah.
we're not talking about Casper. It's more like,
An energy almost.
yes, like this energy, this feeling inside of us that should be driving our actions.
So it's not just about what we do, but why we do it. I like that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, so if love starts as this internal spirit, this energy, how do we even recognize it in ourselves and in someone else? Like, how do we know if it's the real deal or just more of this fear-driven stuff?
That's the big question, right? Like, how do you actually figure that out? And the source is big on this whole self-awareness thing. Like, before you even try to understand someone else, you got to understand yourself, your own feelings.
So it's like, check in with yourself first. Am I coming from a place of love here? Or is it more about like being attached to this person?
Yeah,
Or maybe I'm just scared of being alone and that's why I'm holding on.
exactly. And are my expectations even realistic? The source had this analogy I thought was interesting. They called it like tuning into your own emotional compass.
Okay, I like that. Tuning into your emotional compass. It's like we all have this internal guidance system, but we don't always listen to it, Rob.
It's so true. We get caught up in how things look, the dates, the gestures, instead of paying attention to what our gut is telling us.
Totally. It's so easy to get caught up in that stuff. Like you think, oh, this is what a relationship is supposed to look like, but are you even happy?
Right. And that's when you can start to see love where there really isn't any. Or you miss the red flags because you're clinging to this idea of what it's supposed to be.
So how do you tell the difference then between what's real and what's just, like you projecting your own ideas onto the other person?
That's where you really got to pay attention to how someone's actions make you feel. Not just what they're doing, but how it lands with you.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like, are you feeling truly seen by this person,
Mm-hmm.
respected?
All of that. Or are you feeling insecure, like you need to prove yourself?
It's like, what's the emotional response you're having?
Yes. Like, say you tell your partner you need more quality time with them,
Right.
and they respond by showering you with gifts.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
On the surface, it's like, okay, maybe they're trying. But if you still feel unheard, if that deeper need for connection isn't being met, that's a sign.
It's so easy to just, like, focus on the gift, the gesture. But if it's not what you actually need, it's almost like it doesn't even matter.
Right. And that's where being able to talk about this stuff comes in. Being honest with your partner, even when it's hard.
It's almost like we have to become, like, emotional detectives in our relationships.
I love that. Yeah, it's about paying attention to those little clues, those gut feelings telling you something's off.
But you don't want to be, like, suspicious of everything, right?
Right, right. It's not about overanalyzing every little thing. It's about creating a space where you can be open and honest with each other about what feels good and what doesn't.
So how do you actually do that? Like, it's one thing to talk about emotional compasses and all that, but what about those situations where someone's actions just aren't matching up with their
Yes.
words or even just with what you need?
Well, the source talks about setting really clear boundaries and communicating what you need
I'm
directly.
not expecting your partner to just, like, automatically know, right?
Exactly. It's about saying, hey, this is important to me, and not being afraid to do that.
So both people feel empowered to do that. What else did they say about actually having these conversations?
They talked about active listening a lot. And I know everyone says that, but they had a really good point. It's not just about hearing the words, it's about actually trying to understand where the other person is coming from.
Even if you don't agree with it, right?
Yes, even if you're like, I don't get why you feel that way, just trying to see it from their side.
So you both feel heard and, like, validated.
Yeah,
Which makes sense. You need that for trust, for real intimacy.
absolutely. And I think the other thing is just remembering that this is like a lifelong thing,
Love it.
learning how to do relationships well. It's not like you figure it out overnight.
It's a process, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, this has been such an amazing deep dive. We've covered so much. It's kind of hard to even remember where we started.
I know. We went from love as an action to what is love, really?
Yeah,
How do we even know?
exactly. So much good stuff in there. As we wrap up, is there, like, one big thing you hope our listeners take away from this?
Maybe just that love is a journey, It's not a destination. So it's about showing up for each other, even when it's hard, choosing to connect on a deeper level.
Love that. And choosing to grow, both together and on your own. So good. As always, thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Until next time, keep exploring.